Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin says he won't support President Biden's social and climate spending plan. Senator Manchin has frequently voiced his opposition to what the president hoped would be the second part of his legislative legacy, but still expressed a willingness to negotiate with the White House. But on Sunday, that all changed.
I've always said this, Brett, if I can't go home and explain it to the people of West Virginia, I can't vote for it. And I cannot vote to continue with this piece of legislation. I just can't. I've tried everything humanly possible. I can't get there.
You're done. This is a no.
This is a no on this legislation.
The announcement garnered swift responses from the White House, which accused Senator Manchin of not negotiating in good faith, to progressives who expressed anger and disappointment. Manchin supported the White House's infrastructure bill, but rejected the climate and social spending plan. That could reflect the political realities of the state he represents. President Biden lost West Virginia by nearly 40 points last year. Meanwhile, the nation is entering yet another COVID surge. The average number of daily new cases is spiking as the Omicron variant spreads rapidly across most of the country. President Biden met with the COVID-19 task force ahead of a planned address to the nation Tuesday on the administration's response to the increase. Here's White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
This is not a speech about locking the country down. This is a speech outlining and being direct and clear with the American people about the benefits of being vaccinated, the steps we're going to take to increase access and to increase testing, and the risks posed to unvaccinated individuals.
Let's bring in Ed O'Keefe, Nikole, Killion, and Siobhan Hughes. Ed is a CBS News senior White House and political correspondent. Nikole is a CBS News congressional correspondent. And Siobhan is a Capitol Hill reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Welcome. It's good to see you all. Nikole, let me begin with you. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said after Senator Manchin declared his opposition to President Biden's social spending plan that, quote, the Senate will, in fact, consider the Build Back Better Act very early in the new year so that every member of this body has the opportunity to make their position known on the Senate floor, not just on television. So, Nikole, why still vote on it?
Well, I think Senator Schumer explained it very clearly there in that it's about having that opportunity for each senator to show their position and show where they stand. We also, over the weekend, heard from Senator Bernie Sanders, who also said the same thing. I mean, part of this is a dare, right? Like, even though Senator Manchin has come out and said that he's a no right now, it's almost daring him to, make it even more official by taking this to the Senate floor when you have every other Democrat who's prepared to support this. And is he really going to be that odd man standing out? Now, he has elaborated on his position, whether that's concern about the impact on the debt and the economy and inflation as some of the reasons why he doesn't support the package right now, and that he really can't explain this to his constituents. But on the same token, so much has been invested in this package by Democrats. We heard from Speaker Pelosi earlier today, who said she is not deterred, that conversations are ongoing and that the case will be made that this has to happen. This is a key component of the president's agenda. So you can bet that there is a lot of pressure on Senator Manchin, and not only potentially to cause him to reverse course, but also, again, to put that pressure on him to, is he really going to buck the party? Is he really going to do this beyond just making an appearance on a Sunday show?
Well, Ed, the White House press secretary issued a sharply worded rebuke to Senator Manchin, saying the senator's comments, quote, represent a sudden and inexplicable reversal in his position and a breach of his commitments to the president and the senator's colleagues in the House and Senate. How much did the White House have riding on this legislation?
Oh, everything, as Nikole just laid out. There's just such incredible focus and determination here at the White House to get that legislation done. And more than anything, it has cost an incredible amount of time and political capital. By now, the White House had hoped this thing would have been passed, and the president, vice president, and congressional Democrats would be out selling it to the country, explaining what's going to be in it. Remember, originally they had hoped it would be done by the end of the summer. Then they thought maybe by early fall and Thanksgiving, then Christmas. And now Senator Manchin has essentially delivered one of his state's best exports, coal, to the president by saying it's not going to happen, and it may not happen in its current form at all at some point into next year. So they will, as they are up at the Capitol, going to continue pushing to try to get something done. And they realize that that is going to require regrouping, talking to all facets of the Democratic Party yet again, and we'll wait to see what we learn about a potential conversation between the president and the senator themselves. There are reports that that's happened. We haven't nailed that down specifically. But if they continue to talk through the holiday season, what's to say that the Senate can't come back in early January, perhaps copy and paste some modified version of this bill into the existing legislation, pass it, and send it back to the House? The question there will be, do the folks in the House trust what the Senate just did? Or are all those progressives who've been warning all year that they shouldn't trust Senator Manchin because he was going to strip this down, going to revolt and withhold support? It'll be an election year by then, and so the calculation may be a little different, with an understanding on all sides that they've got to do something to demonstrate that they're trying to help Americans who are in desperate need of assistance.
Well, Siobhan, jumping off of what Ed was saying there, do we know what exactly is next for Democrats before the holiday recess and then once they come back in the new year?
So Democrats are going to be meeting on this tomorrow, but in addition, they're going to be meeting on their voting legislation. With Joe Manchin, they did draft a measure to do things like expand early voting, enable mail-in voting all across the entire country. And so they do have some things on their agenda to tackle while they're trying to figure out if they can work out a narrower version of the Build Back Better legislation. But that Build Back Better legislation is going to be a very, very heavy lift. They know they've disappointed progressives, and they're going to try to use some of the in-between time to put their attention on that voting bill that is also a big progressive priority item.
Well, Nikole, Republicans are declaring victory after hearing of Senator Manchin's killing the administration's social spending plan. How are Republicans trying to leverage this just about 10 months out from the midterms?
Well, again, I think we have to be careful about saying this bill is dead or it's been killed simply because, as we've just discussed, there are still negotiations ongoing in the White House. And again, Democratic leadership has made clear that they are going to try to push forward in some capacity on this package. But look, you know, Republicans have been warning all along that they believe this is a reckless spending plan and, you know, something that they never want to see the light of day. So it is a coup for them at the moment, so much so that we do know Senator Manchin, you know, he's periodically met with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell to the point that some have asked both Manchin and McConnell if Manchin would potentially change parties, given his position not only on this issue, but many others. And Senator McConnell, before they broke for the recess, said that he actually has tried to convince Senator Manchin to switch parties, but he just doesn't think that will happen. So certainly, you know, Manchin does align more to some Republican positions. He does tend to be more of the conservative mind within the party. But at the end of the day, while Republicans may be celebrating and kind of doing a happy dance again, you know, Democrats pushing back that they will eventually get this done.
All right. Meantime, Ed, President Biden is addressing the nation about the Omicron variant on Tuesday. You were at the briefing where Jen Psaki gave a little more insight. Do we expect any shift in policy?
Not really. As you heard her say, this is not a speech about lockdowns, which would be the shift, because the president already said a few weeks ago that any winter battle plan for this pandemic would not involve lockdowns or shutdowns as there were at earlier stages. What you're going to hear him say, as you heard her say, is the nation is now in a far different, they'd argue, stronger position against the pandemic, despite the fact that this is a variant that clearly is breaking through on people who've been vaccinated and boosted, because they've been vaccinated and boosted. And while vaccines aren't meant to completely prevent someone from getting sick, they are designed to stop serious illness. And so you'll probably see the president stress that if you've gotten your shots, if you are taking smart steps to avoid getting infected, and you do get sick for some reason, you'll at least be in better shape than you would have been before vaccines were widely distributed. And expect him, on the advice of his medical advisors and several Democrats across the country who've been speaking in starker terms, to lay it out pretty plain to people. That if you've got your shot and your booster, you're going to be okay. Even if you get sick, you won't get seriously ill. But if you're one of those unvaccinated folks, you may end up dead. Is he going to say it that explicitly? Probably not. But but that's what Psaki inferred today. And that's what Democrats like the Governor Jared Polis of Colorado have been saying to constituents. Look, we've offered you the opportunity to protect yourself. If you choose to take it, great. If you don't, well, you may suffer the consequences. And there's been an argument among Democrats that that is a better position to be taking now, to lay it plain to people, and in essence to sort of set up the rest of the country to say, if you're upset about the lack of progress, take it up with these people over here who continue to not get their shots. There has been some conservative reaction on social media, all this, saying, gosh, you know, now he's picking winners and losers, but there are fellow members of his party and others who would say, look, that's the reality. And if you choose not to take them up on the protections that are being offered, then, you know, you suffer the consequences. The other thing I'll be listening for, Elaine, because we've spent plenty of time since the elections last month talking about this, is what does he say about the future of maintaining schooling at a time when, you know, the young, and many of whom are not yet fully vaccinated or eligible for vaccines, are still going into classrooms and daycare centers? What assurances, if any, does he provide to parents, families, and educators about being able to provide assistance to school districts so that they can continue to provide schooling? There's been this CDC revision where you basically are going to be, they're urging school districts to test so that kids can continue going, that even if they get exposed to a classmate who has it, as long as they test negative, they're not going to have to quarantine anymore. Here in Washington, D.C., just today, they announced, for example, that school's going to be delayed until January 5th, not January 3rd. The first 2 days of that new year will be spent making sure that parents and educators get at-home testing kits, take those tests, and start bringing them into school. And if you get a negative test, you can keep going. That is what the CDC is advising. That very well may become the norm in many big school districts, hopefully smaller school districts across the country as well. And that would be a modification designed to address a huge concern among parents, especially with young children, that education has to continue so that the parents can go to work, so that some semblance of normalcy can be maintained despite the pandemic.
Right. So many parents looking for clarity on that very issue that you just laid out, Ed. Well, Siobhan, switching gears, Congressman Adam Kinzinger yesterday told CNN that the House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol insurrection is looking into whether former President Trump committed a crime. What did he say about where that part of the investigation stands?
Well, Adam Kinzinger was responding to a clip that CNN played of Liz Cheney, the vice chair of the committee, saying that it was important to investigate whether President Trump, through inaction or inaction, had sought to corruptly obstruct the proceedings of Congress. She was invoking the obstruction statute. Obstructing congressional proceedings carries with it a maximum penalty of up to 20 years. And when he didn't kind of disavow that that was an area the committee was going, he was referencing the fact that that committee is going to produce a report once its work is wrapped up. That report will be available to the Justice Department. And what members of that committee are telegraphing, without saying it explicitly, is that there is some thought the Justice Department might pick up that report, look at its details, and decide that the report itself warrants the opening of an investigation or even the pursuit of obstruction charges against the former president.
Well, Nikole, originally Congress had wanted to pass voting rights legislation by the end of this year. That has not happened. Could Democrats make another effort to pass that in the new year?
Well, Leader Schumer has made clear it's going to be one of the first things they take up when they come back in January, perhaps as soon as that first week of January 3rd, when they come back in. And at this point, there has been a lot of discussion, especially right before the recess, about how to change the rules. Certainly many senators, including Senators Manchin and Sinema, have gone on record saying they don't want to abolish the filibuster, but a group of senators, including Senator Warnock and others, have been looking at, are there other workarounds? Could it be a talking filibuster, or could it be something else? In fact, just today we heard Leader Schumer in a radio interview not only raise that talking filibuster and perhaps shutting it down with only 50 votes, but also, for instance, perhaps allowing Republicans to make endless amendments, but cutting off that debate at 50 votes. So right there are kind of two ideas that it sounds like Senate Democrats are tinkering with and toying with. We do know know that they did, this smaller group that's been discussing these rules changes did meet with past Senate parliamentarians to try to get some guidance on, again, potential workarounds and rule changes. So it is something that has very much been under active discussion, and as Leader Schumer said, something they will likely try to take up and consider sometime after the first of the year.
Well, Siobhan, former President Trump is turning to a tactic he's used with regularity, a lawsuit, this time trying to limit New York Attorney General Letitia James's investigation into the Trump Organization. Give us a sense of the legal fights the former president is engaged in.
The fights are numerous. In addition to that, he is trying to stop the National Archives from releasing material he had to turn over under the Presidential Records Act to that January 6th committee. An appeals court has rejected that. And he is likely, people expect that to go to the Supreme Court. He is in the middle of trying to ask all of his former aides to assert executive privilege before that January 6th committee. In addition, he has to deal with the fact that his tax records were released, and it's hard for him to have recourse there. So he's got multiple legal fights brewing, and has put his focus now on the only thing he can, which is the political process.
Finally, Ed, Democratic Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy of Florida announced she will not run for re-election. Now, she is the 22nd House Democrat to announce their departure next year. What does that mean for midterm elections?
A few things. If you want to compare it to last time a party in power was in trouble, Democrats at this point are on pace with the Republican retirements that were seen back in 2018. As members were starting to see the writing on the wall or realize that it was time to hang it up after several years of service. You've seen a handful of House Democrats who've been in office for decades in some cases or a long time, who are either senior members or committee chairmen, knowing that their time is coming, say, I'm not running next year. That's guys like Alan Lowenthal of Long Beach, California, Jackie Spear from the Bay Area, Edie Bernice Johnson from Texas. Stephanie Murphy is a different example of a House Democratic retirement, and the kind that should worry Democrats. She's represented a swing district in the Orlando area for 3 terms. She's someone who had toyed with running statewide, believing that her brand of moderate Democratic politics could work in the Sunshine State. She held off when Val Demings got into the Senate race. And now she's getting out as the Republican legislature in Florida redraws her congressional lines in a way that will probably benefit the Republicans far more than they did in the last cycle. In essence, she's backing off what would be an expensive, high-profile, and ultimately potentially futile fight to hold on to a seat, citing that she's had fun, she's enjoyed the work, it's been fulfilling, but she wants to go back to spend time with her young children because this is simply a fight that she doesn't want to have anymore. If you see more members like her in states like Florida, in the Midwest, in other parts of the South, announce that they're getting out because their lines are being redrawn in a way that might make it too competitive a race, and they're not somebody who's been in Congress for decades, that signals that the Republican wave next year could be even far larger than Democrats fear, because you're not going to have those well-funded, sort of marquee, able to raise money candidates on the ballot putting up a fight against Republicans. This is one that is going to cause some ripples. And we know that come the new year, when they get back to town around January 10th, we're likely to hear about more Democrats announcing they're not going to run for re-election either.
All right, Ed, Nikole, and Siobhan, thank you all very much.